TV. Hannibal TV, are you ready to get crushed like a grape?
Devon Larratt, I'm about to do an interview with Hannibal TV. Talk about arm wrestling. Talk about how I don't eat food anymore. Big power, big power.
I am with world champion arm wrestler here, Devon Larratt from the World Arm Wrestling League, I should say.
Yeah.
Right. And this is Hannibal from thehannibal.tv.com, of course. And you hold multiple world championships, actually. So rather than me naming them all and some of your accomplishments, do you want to start off by just reminding people of some of the impressive world championship victories you've had?
Really, I mean, the main thing I've done is just been crazy in love with the sport since like I was a kid. But of note, I won open weight world title in 2008, right-handed open weight world title in 2013, left-handed, so I was holding them both at the same time. And that's really my main achievement. After that, I kind of dipped to 225. I held the 225 title basically from around 2014 till 2017, and as of 2018 I have kind of left the 225-pound division, and I am trying to get massive and go after that, you know, top spot again. So.
And you are on a 3-day fast right now, and this is the 3rd day, so if you see
oh my God. This is never ever stop eating, all you strength guys. It's the worst feeling in the world, but yeah, this is day 3 for me, no food.
And this is, of course, our second interview. People could search up our first interview from a few years ago. A lot's happened since the first interview, but these questions are going to be a little bit all over the place, and some of them were provided by my friend Mike from Florida, who is a huge fan of yours, where you're actually more popular actually in the US and Canada, surprisingly. Have you noticed that too?
I think that the sport has real strongholds, and in Canada it is more underground. I think the States, just because you know, a lot of the promotions that have gone on there, I think that there's more prevalence of arm wrestling lovers, and you know, Europe, you know, arm wrestling's really growing globally. Got to get more here in Ottawa.
That's for sure. Maybe one day I'll jump into it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
You're perfect for it. Yeah.
As you said, today might be the day to have our match finally, because
yeah, man, this is the weakest day probably that you're gonna get me, you know, in the last, you know, big period. Yeah, tomorrow I'll be a different man.
And you don't have the mullet on today, which I'll start off by asking you what that was all about.
Well, everybody knows that the mullet is one of the most powerful hairstyles that, you know, there's ever been. And I had a match with Denis Saplankov, who I think most people know. This dude is just ridiculous. Like, he's so strong, like physically, he's so focused. And the Europeans are really big on their measurements. Like, they measure their weights, they measure their arms, they're measuring everything. And they were doing this segment where they were, and dude, I just don't measure up. So I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have bigger hair than him. So.
And speaking of Denis Saplankov, he has very unique genetics, very thick hands and massive bone structure. Have you ever encountered anyone with genetics like him before?
Never. To me, Denis is one of a kind. Like when you look at Marvel Comics and see the Incredible Hulk, yeah, it's Denis Saplankov for real. Like, I think that a lot of people have met bodybuilders. You know, like, you see a bodybuilder, and honestly, like, when I see a bodybuilder, coming from a strength athlete perspective, I don't have, like, it's an illusion, and I can see through the illusion. For the most, not to say that bodybuilders are weak, because there are a lot of really, really strong bodybuilders, but Denis Saplankov is on a completely different wavelength here. Like, just to give you an example, like, everything is thick, okay? Like, everything. His frame and structure and connections it all makes sense when you look at him. You know, like the full orchestra is playing. I remember looking at his arm, like this region, and it was very clear to me that it was comparable to my hip joint. You
Wow.
know? Yeah, in everything, in like the tendons, everything. He is very, very strong. Yeah.
And you were mentioning to me before that some arm wrestling has steroid testing, others don't. Of course, growth hormone, he may have a genetic condition, but growth hormone is also known to actually increase the bone density and stuff too. Do you think he's just like almost like a giant that just isn't that tall, that kind of genetic condition, or do you think other stuff might play into it?
You know, I really can't presume because I just don't have the facts. Whatever it is, I mean, he's made himself into a titan, okay? So whether it's by his birth or, I mean, I don't know, but either way, he's here, and this is what he is. Like,
right.
It's amazing.
And a lot of people compared you to Superman, so I guess that this would be like the ultimate supervillain. You have to
I gotta
defeat
come
right now.
back. I gotta come back. It's inspiring to face him. Like, I'd like to try him right-handed. Like, my left is, you know, my left isn't bad, but I'll tell you, my right's a lot better, especially right now, due to like just, you know, the time of my surgeries and stuff. But knowing what I know now, like, I think I would love an opportunity to avenge it. I would love that. But I know what I have to do. I've gotten a lot of information. So when I'm ready, to me, Denis is Everest. You know, he is in our sport, and I'd say that his greatness actually in strength actually goes further than just arm wrestling. Like, if you can't clearly recognize what a mountain of strength this man is, like, you need to take a look. But it would be so big for me to beat him. So I'm going to invest a lot.
And speaking of mountain of strength, you did beat the mountain from Game of Thrones, and he's also in the recent Kickboxer 2 movie. How would you compare those two's strength?
So Hafthor is a tall guy who has gotten a lot stronger. The thickness and girth is not comparable. Like, if there was a wall and you had to run through it, like, Denis is getting through that thing a lot faster, if you ask me. Like, Denis to me is like way thicker, but the difference really is Denis is a trained arm wrestler. Okay, so I mean, I don't know strongman well enough how if Denis could have done it there too, but to look at him, the thickness is out of this world.
At one point, arm wrestling was actually a strongman sport, I believe.
Yeah, that's right.
Nathan Jones actually broke his arm in strongman. We interviewed him recently, actually. What do you think of Nathan Jones?
That's a huge man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just know him from that event.
Yeah. Okay. He was also a pro wrestler, and he's an actor now, but yeah, that was a pretty brutal break.
Total break. Ugh, and what a place to do it. Like,
any updates on Travis Bagent's recent injury? I might have his last name pronounced wrong.
Yeah, Travis.
Yeah.
So he, I believe, has a minor pec injury against the Romanian athlete Sabin Badulescu. They were having a match, and Travis didn't quite finish, and he blew his pec, which is actually one of the more common injuries in arm wrestling. But I think it's quite minor, and I think he's probably actually somewhat recovered from it already.
Now, I heard that there was sit-down arm wrestling matches in the original days of arm wrestling. Does the sit-down style still go on, and what do you think of it? Advantages?
People are still doing sit-down arm wrestling. Sit-down arm wrestling is considered like kind of one of the purest forms of arm. Like, I don't want to say it's the purest. It's by some arm wrestling purists. It's still practiced, but it is very much not widespread. I think that they have kind of one kind of championships annually. It is a slightly different sport. It's kind of weird if you ask me. Like it's very much like you can't use your body too much. The hold is different. It's cool. Like, I mean, I love all kinds of arm wrestling, but I guess I should try it before I really knock it. I've done it a couple times, but yeah, it's not that big these days.
Now, I mentioned superstar Billy Graham to you last interview. He's in the WWE Hall of Fame, and he used to arm wrestle challengers from the crowd. And he said, actually, when I was talking to him about you, that he used to arm wrestle guys that were small and skinny with very little muscle, but were excellent arm wrestlers that were very hard to beat. And some of the muscular guys, on the other hand, were easier to beat. Have you found that too?
I've arm wrestled, I'm going to say tens of thousands of human beings. And I'll tell you, in real professional arm wrestlers, normally when they start to accumulate muscle, it's normally a sign of danger. But in like the common person on the street who's untrained, who's coming in, big muscles normally is like a very clear sign that this guy's going to be an easy win. Every once in a while you get a guy with big muscles who's a total tank, but for the most part, the strongest people that I arm wrestle off the street are like model looking guys, like guys who are just healthy, have no extra muscle, just fit. These guys, for whatever reason, their connective structures are really intact. They have good positional strength, so they can flex, they have good flexibility. They're not encumbered in any way, which is important in arm wrestling. So totally agree. Skinny guys, big power.
Do you think Alexey Voevoda will keep arm wrestling, and has he competed since the big return where Tim Brishnin beat him?
The thing is Alexey Voevoda is one of those guys in the sport who's just regarded as royalty. So he's the kind of guy that no matter, it can be in 10 years from now, Alexey Voevoda shows up and he can get any match that he wants in the arm wrestling world. And he's also just on that athletic and genetic level where it's just impossible for him to be weak, no matter what he does, even if he's a vegan, even if he's training. I think he's like in Russian government now. I actually, believe it or not, just spoke with him today. And he said that he'll be ready to come back in maybe a year or a year and a half. And we loosely spoke about a match. So I do believe he'll be back. I think he's got a lot of things going on in his life right now, but the guy's an athlete and a warrior. And as long as he doesn't become too much of a statesman, I'm sure we'll see his return.
And how is Tim doing these days? And do you have any funny stories about him?
Tim is still arm wrestling hardcore. Tim Bresnan, the problem with Tim Bresnan is he doesn't know how to take a loss properly. Like, the guy has lost to me every single time he's arm wrestled with me. And lately he's been on this thing where he's like, oh, the only reason you beat me is because of the Canadian referees. And if he would just accept the fact that I was stronger than him and let that digest into his soul, it might actually make him a greater human being. But he's making these excuses, so I worry about him.
And could you explain what the king move is and why people say it should be outlawed?
Ooh, that is a really... How much time we got?
as much as you. Well, you don't have to go into great detail.
It's a big subject. King's move is probably one of the most controversial things when looking forward in arm wrestling. Like, I think that a lot of people are really wondering what to do with it. King's move is a special kind of arm wrestling. Anybody can do the King's move. Anybody. It's just a style of arm wrestling. Basically, there's lots of ways to fight. Like, arm wrestling is a martial art, right? And there's a lot of techniques. The King's move is a form of top roll, which is an outside technique that attacks the fingers, makes your wrist bend back. And it's done like without shoulder commitment. So it's really defensive. And a lot of people start to, not like that right away. But the next problem with it is it's a strap-based move. So you basically have to use a strap to do this move correctly, which takes it another step into hatred for a lot of people. And then the next problem with it is that it's done really well by people with physical limitations. Okay, so like, how boxers, how wrestlers got the cauliflower ear, and like you see that dude and you're like, oh, I don't want to mess with that guy. So arm wrestlers got the wonky arm, right? Arms don't straighten, right? And this process of tightening starts to increase your ability to execute a King's move at a higher angle, okay? Because there's something that happens right before the joint kind of reaches its limit of movement, range of movement. It's like somehow it protects itself more, and there's something about the breaks that happen in the musculature and everything. I can't really give you science here, but guys who have this get real tight at the end of the range. And if your arm only straightens this much, you got the breaks like right here. So people don't like that physical, like things that aren't going to help you kind of outside of arm wrestling are really helping you. And then there's and the other problem with it is we have two positions that we call in arm wrestling called dangerous position. One of them is when you start to look at your hand like this, look away from your hand and kind of expose your arm to break in this way. And the other one is when you start to open your arm to hyperextension. And for amateur arm wrestlers, everybody's pretty tight on this, but in pro arm wrestling, we kind of start to agree that you have the right to break your arm as a professional arm wrestler. So there's this weird discussion that everybody's in on the King's move. And the reason why it has the King's move name is because the people who like the move have called it this, because we feel that the highest level of arm wrestling, you're allowed to break your arm. And if that's what it takes to win, then that's cool, man. That guy's the king. If you're willing to die on the table, then you have every right to be the king. And the King's move is really exposing that to happen. So I personally, I'm a big fan of it. I'm just a big fan of all things arm wrestling, and King's move is a part of arm wrestling. The technique itself is not unbeatable. There's a clear way to beat it. It's just not the way that a lot of people want to beat it. And it's not like, a lot of moves are like any move can beat any other move. The King's move is actually special in that, there's places that you really shouldn't go. Like, there's really a path that you kind of have to take, and if you're not good at that path, well, you're kind of out of luck. So, it's a controversial move.
And we're going to allow some fan questions now, and someone's asking when your next match is.
So, my next match is probably not until the beginning of February. And I think it's at Viking Arms.
Okay.
Yeah, Viking Arms in Norway. Yeah, there might be something before that, but I'm doing some work with Jujumafu. I think it'll probably just be fun, but yeah, probably Norway.
Someone says they want to see you versus Vitaly.
Vitali.
Vitali, okay.
So do I. To me, Vitaly Lalatin is really he's so good. He's like the future of Russian arm wrestling. I've been watching this guy forever. Had a chance to meet him. He's everything he's been cracked up to be. Super tall, like 6'9". Yeah, I definitely got to pull that guy. I'd rather pull him right hand, to tell you the truth, right now. But yeah, it's a match that has to happen, like now.
Now, I don't know if this is a guy being stupid or a real question, but why are priests from Finland so good at Mortal Kombat?
Let me see. Why are priests from Finland so good at Mortal Kombat? Who's messing with me? Because I love Mortal Kombat.
Blue Drum Torso. That's his YouTube name. It must be someone that must.
Yeah, maybe something he's messing with me because I love Mortal Kombat.
And you answered this in the last interview, but someone's asking you about Over the Top. You don't have to go into detail.
Yeah,
someone wants to look it up.
Over the Top. Yeah. We got to get more movies. Well, they just had a new movie, Champion. There's a Korean movie that just got released. Yeah, so we got another arm wrestling movie out there.
And the same Beast Mode McGee guy is asking you about your thoughts on the upcoming Bagent versus C. Plenkov. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, short answer, Dennis will win. That's the short answer. Nothing's impossible. Travis can win. Travis has got a great shot. The problem really will be whose house, okay? If it's with any kind of restrictive rules, there's no chance. There's just no chance. I love Travis as an arm wrestler. I love what he can do, but in my opinion, the strength differential is so great. Like I've had a lot of experience with Travis. I've arm wrestled him a lot of times, a lot of different ways, and I know that if Travis holds me, Travis's left is a little bit better than my left most of the time. But I know that if he holds me and lets me work, I'll overcome him within a short period of time. I've never felt the kind of horsepower that Dennis has. Even if Travis blows through his hand, it's going to go to the strap. When it goes to strap, even if Travis takes his wrist, I just don't see that elbow and shoulder becoming unlodged. I just don't see it. The only way that Travis has a shot is if he gets the match to be somewhere like a Game of Arms type scenario where he's able to really, but even then I worry about him. Like, if I had $1,000, I'd put it on Dennis.
And when are we going to see you pull Dennis again?
When I'm ready. And that will be, in my mind, it's going to take me a good year. A good year of implementing everything that I've learned. And I want him right hand before left. Like, I want to do it right hand. I've felt him left. Like I said, Dennis is my Everest, and I really, I'll climb that thing or die trying.
Do you do autograph conventions? And if not, where can people get your autograph if they're interested?
I'd say the best way is come to one of the shows. World Arm Wrestling League is going to do a full season. It'll be all across the States and international, or just jump into one of the events that I'm on. I kind of push everything out on my social media, so I travel around.
Did you ever kill anyone when you were overseas in the military?
Oh my God, let me tell you. I think that the best thing for me to do is to say that it was a real honor to serve my country. And yeah, let's just leave it at that.
I guess the Mortal Kombat guy says Finnish hymns is the reason why they're great at Mortal Kombat, the priests. So that was the inside joke on it.
I get it. That's smart.
Someone says spectacular belt behind you. Another guy, I want to see you win so bad against C. Plenkov, but do you believe that if you had trained heavier and brought more fire like WAL 17, you would have won?
I think that for me to beat Dennis, I have to be in perfect physical and mental condition. I think that the key for me to beat Dennis is I have to have one area. Well, actually, I have to have two things. I don't want to give away too much, but I did get a lot from the encounter. I have to be, for me to do it under those rule systems is more difficult for me. I would love to do it in a more neutral kind of ground in terms of in terms of league format. I'm going to need a spot that's super hard, and I'm going to need to also be able to do a lot of range in my movements and have a sticking spot at the end of them. I'm going to have to use my length more against him. But the main thing that I have to do for the next year is just work my strength. Like, very simply, just work a simple periodization program and get my horsepower up in the moves that are going to make the match stop. Yeah.
Thoughts on Scott Mendelson and his ascent to the top of arm wrestling?
Scott Mendelson, here's what I really like. Scott's a personal friend of mine now. He's come up and visited me a few times, and I really like him. Really smart guy. I feel like arm wrestling is a very difficult sport to get very good in, and I feel like you need to. It's really hard when you're awesome at one sport, and like when I say awesome, like if you're like a world champion legend like Scott, you have got a lot of damage in your body. And now to take that and to now move into arm wrestling, where in the process of becoming a world champion in this sport, you're gonna accumulate like equal damage to that. It's a very hard road. What I would love to see Scott do is be kind of the guy at the gate of the castle to all these other strength athletes who are great, who want to come in, like the strongmen, the power lifters. I would love to see a super match between Eddie Hall and Scott. You know, to me, that's interesting. I know how difficult it's going to be for Scott to become like the world champion of arm wrestling. It's going to be hard, but I would love to see him pull like super strong dudes who are also trying to make that journey over.
Do you think if Oleg recovers, you might do a rematch with him?
Yeah, for sure that'll happen. I hope. I heard he's healing up and things are starting to move forward for him. That kid is blessed with some amazing genetics, and he's still young. So you know, he's turned his physical limitations into a gift before. So you know, hopefully he can get back on the horse and do the same thing with this terrible accident.
What are your thoughts on UFC, someone's asking?
I hope we can copy them. I hope that arm wrestling in 5 years is the next UFC. I feel like we are the next breakout sport that's probably going to follow a similar path. Yeah.
What music do you like to listen to get pumped up?
Rammstein. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to close off the fan question portion now and get back into the regular questions. When you think of guys like Michael Todd with his bone lock or joint locked arms, and does it give an unfair advantage?
I don't think it. I personally don't think it does, because if somebody asked me, "Hey, do you want an arm that doesn't straighten?" I'd say no, because you're going to get more inflammation. You're going to get a reduced range of motion, which is going to in turn lead to a decrease in strength. So for every advantage that it gives you, there's also a disadvantage. And I feel like if you're on that podium, if you're on that stage, it's because you've battled for a long time. Like, and I think that to knock anybody for any specific thing, I mean, you can knock somebody for anything. Oh, that guy's tall, that guy's muscles are too big, that guy's hands are too big, that guy's arm doesn't straighten. There's a way around everything.
What was the most satisfying victory of your arm wrestling career? We know what's going to be.
Yeah, that's right. If we can talk about the future, it's when I climb Everest. It's not always the ones that you think. You know, it actually, for me, when I look back on my arm wrestling career, there's been a lot of them that have meant a lot to me, but one that was huge for me was when I beat Ron Bath in 6 or 7 at the Mike Gould Classic. It was, for me, a really massive deal because I had done very well in Canada. I was like recognized in Canada as being the #1 guy, and Ron Bath was like a legend. You know, everybody knew Ron Bath and how legitimate he was. And I had just done a 6-month combat tour where I was like a total flake coming back, and the timing of it, the relevance of it for me, was massive. Like when I beat Ron Bath, I felt like it completely changed me as a human being.
Is X-Arm still going on, and would you ever compete yourself in that bizarre mix of arm wrestling and fighting?
Oh man, I love X-Arm. I love to watch X-Arm. I don't think it's still going. I haven't seen anything new from them for a while. Man, I don't know. You know, if you pay me enough, anything's possible, but it's cool. The thing I don't understand about X-Arm is, like, you can just pin the guy and you can win. So I don't even know that it's that much different from arm wrestling.
And on that same subject, obviously this is mostly a pro wrestling YouTube channel. In pro wrestling, a lot of people think a guy named Haku was the toughest real fighter ever of pro wrestlers, and no one ever messes with him, and he's kind of on a level of his own. Is there anyone in arm wrestling like that where he has kind of a mystique about him, where he's the toughest arm wrestler in actual legit fighting?
Like the toughest arm wrestler.
We know you're skilled in hand-to-hand combat. You may or may not have kills, so I don't know if we can include you in that category.
Let's see. The toughest arm wrestler. I mean, Gary definitely would have been on that list. Yeah, man, I don't know. I wouldn't want to be locked in an elevator with Dennis. There's a guy, Levant. There's some big guys, and like there are some strong dudes. When it comes to their fighting skill, hey, Tim Bresnan is a pretty renowned fighter. Yeah, I mean, fighting, there's lots of different ways to fight.
And what are your thoughts on Matthias Schlitt?
Yeah.
And his oversized arms.
Matthias Schlitt. Yeah. The cool thing, one of the cool things in arm wrestling is we get a certain breed of freak. So there's like 2 kind of freaks that we're getting. Actually, I guess there's 3. There's 3 freaks that we're getting. We're getting the acromegalia guys, who are just, diesel strong because they just keep growing everywhere. We got the gigantism guys, who, I don't know if you know who Jeff Dave is. So he's just like ridiculous. He's like the guy from I don't know if you know that Ludacris video, get back.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'll check it out.
Anyway, so he's got gigantism of the hands and forearms. So, and then guys like Matthias have a blood flow disorder, from what I understand. So like their arterial spread is like heavy to like one limb. So it's like super fed and like super nourished, and and this is from birth. So yeah, it's Hellboy syndrome, right? Yeah. So there's a few guys like that in the sport.
Have you ever tried those heavy hand grippers like the one Iron Mind sells?
Yeah, you probably got a couple of them floating around here somewhere.
What's the hardest one you've closed?
I used to, when I thought that they actually helped for arm wrestling, I was clacking the 3 like, 8 or 9 times back when I thought they were relevant. Everything's going to help in arm wrestling, like it's all good, but really it's more about the wrist than it is the hand. Like my hand got really strong, and then I was arm wrestling and my wrist would be bent back, so I was like, okay, well, it's a full chain kind of thing. Yeah, the gripper itself is only going to help you so much.
Is there any odd techniques in arm wrestling that the common person wouldn't know about, such as maybe crushing someone's hand so hard they'd give up, or pulling the thumb in a certain way that would hurt?
I'd say that the main thing that people don't know is that you really, really are pulling towards yourself. And even like when you're arm wrestling, if you even pull towards your own pin pad, is actually quite often a really good thing, because you pull right into the person's fingertips, and then from there it gets easier. When it comes to like squeezing and like thumb locks, and I think that that's a lot of like, folklore. I've never seen any of that stuff work.
Will the Game of Arms show ever come back? Why was it canceled so soon? It was excellent.
Yeah, Game of Arms was amazing. If they ever, I basically sold a portion of my soul to get on season 2, and they canceled season 2 halfway through the season. If they released episode 1 of season 2, that show would have been so loved. Like, there were fights, it was insane, good drama. It was canceled because, from what I understand, the network that was hosting it dropped all of their reality programming, just all of it. They just decided to rebrand and got rid of all the reality shows. Game of Arms was one of them. So yeah, I think that you are going to see a lot of reality type arm wrestling shows coming out in the next few years. I know that there's a lot in the works as we speak, and yeah, there's some really good ideas floating around, so they'll probably take what Game of Arms did and evolve it slightly.
Did you ever know Richard Lupke's back when he had a mullet and wore parachute pants and was all hot-tempered?
No, that's not the Richard Lupke's I knew. I think that Richard Lupke's, when he was the #1 guy, is probably the most dominant. Like, he had the most, like, between him and the #2 was probably the biggest space when he was like his best form. The Richard Lupke's that I know personally is the most mild-mannered, polite gentleman, giant that you've ever met. Couldn't find a nicer guy. Still, at his age, he has so much strength, but he's limited by injuries. But he would still kill Gary Goodrich.
What do you think about the criticisms many have against Jerry Cadorette? They seem to not like his style of often giving up his wrist and going in the strap and getting very close to the opponent and winning with his wrist bent all the way back the whole match.
Yeah, this is a similar discussion to the whole King's Move thing. They're on opposite ends of the arm wrestling spectrum. So when you think about the middle of arm wrestling, it's like a high hook, and then you start to get into outside arm wrestling to the King's Move. And then when you think inside arm wrestling, you got like hooks and presses, and then the flop wrist press is about the far outside regions of arm wrestling technique that we know today. I personally love it. I think it's so cool. I think to do the flop wrist press correctly requires a very unique mind and physical gifts. I think Jerry's a really smart and great arm wrestler. I think that people, who look at arm wrestling as this, bending your wrist kind of test of strength, are shrinking the sport unnecessarily. If you wanna beat a guy, you have to figure them out. That's one of the beautiful things about the sport. It's not one thing. It's a fight.
And this is along the same lines, but what's wrist wrestling versus arm wrestling? What's the difference?
I don't really know. I mean, I've heard it. It's just a different term for the same thing. Like I've heard people say wrist wrestling a lot when you're talking about arm wrestling. A lot of arm wrestlers also practice like a different grip. So instead of holding the hands, they're actually closing their fists and they're hooking around the wrists. It's really kind of a form of practice arm wrestling. Although I've never seen anything formal done this way. I think that maybe in the past they used to call it wrist wrestling more. But I think it's just terminology.
Can shorter guys really wear enormous platforms on their shoes to compete taller?
Yeah, tall guys, short guys a lot are gonna wear platform shoes or they're gonna wear a riser. One of the things that's going on in arm wrestling is there's your belly button and there's your elbow. And really you wanna have the ability to have a clear path to your belly button, because if you can get here, then you can push and everything's in line. When you're shorter at the table, you can pull and row just fine, but to get behind it, it just is a little bit more awkward. So if a short guy can get like up, then he's got that path and he can push properly too. It's to his advantage. So yeah, man, it's real.
And you just came back from Japan. You want to tell us about that trip?
I love Japan. So I went to Japan for one reason, arm sumo. And arm sumo is a variation of arm wrestling. And it's done on a flat table. I saw it in 1999 at the World Championships. And I've been like messing around with the idea ever since then. I met a guy who's in the Arm Sport Association when I was in Borneo. I'm like, dude, you gotta have me out there. Like, I wanna get back into this. Anyways, long and short, I went to Arm Sumo Championships this year after loving it for 19 years from a distance. So the thing that I really noticed about it is the sportsmanship. They have like a different thing over there. It's like they totally acknowledge their competitor as like making them better, and just this simple thing made it shifted their whole requirement for rules. Like they don't even have a referee's grip, which in North American arm wrestling is like vital. It's like one of our most important rules. The agreeing of getting a grip. Yeah. But just in their culture and their sportsmanship and the oath that they do before the event, they come together like way more like fair. It's really cool.
Is there sponsors there that take you out for dinner and stuff? Like in pro wrestling, there's like super fans.
Dude, it was
pay for
so cool.
Yeah.
It was so cool. I had the best sushi I've ever eaten in my life. Like chewing a piece of gum and you eat this tuna is so rich in oil that the gum just melts, Yeah.
Speaking of sushi, I have challenged you maybe in 2019.
Dude,
we're going to have a sushi eating competition.
I can't wait. Like, especially today, because I haven't eaten in like 72 hours. I would kill a sushi place like right now, man. Yeah.
And for India, you also were in India as well.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that trip?
Yeah, man, that place is chaotic, and there's so many people. It's like a booming place for arm wrestling. Really, a lot of these places, Southeast Asia, you got these areas of great population density, and that's where I feel like the sport can really be really infused into the culture, where you have this great population density and people with not a lot of money, because arm wrestling is so accessible, man. Like you can, like I don't even need a table. Like guys can go and practice it, and when you have that density, there's no reason why guys can't be getting together every day on the street and arm wrestling. So I feel like in India, in Japan, like where there's like 25 million people in a city, like you could get guys coming out of that place in army numbers and high level guys. Yeah. I think we're 5 years away from that.
And just to put the talk of it out there, I understand your youngest daughter might get into pro wrestling one day.
Yeah, Avery Larrett. That girl, check her out, man. She's an athletic phenom, and yeah, she's dreaming. Ask her what she wants to be. She's like pro wrestler. Yeah, you got to talk to her.
And she's doing well in arm wrestling.
She's
so
a killer,
far.
man. Avery is physically, she's a monster. She scares me. Like she has no off switch. Like it frightens me. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate that you caught up with us. We've had a lot of feedback on our first interview, and to close this off, what can we expect from you in 2019?
2019, I'm chasing that world title, man. Like I've seen it. I know where it is. I want to do a lot of stuff with arm wrestling. I plan on arm wrestling until I'm dead. Like it's just one of those things that I never plan on leaving. I have a lot of information I got to work with. There's going to be a lot of big shows. There's going to be a lot of fun to be had. So
possibly T-shirts too.
Yeah, man, we're gonna make T-shirts. We'll start blowing it up.
And if they want to follow you, you have Facebook. You got your Maximum Friends, but you're also on Instagram.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, on YouTube, I'm on Facebook.
Yeah, YouTube. Since we have fans on YouTube, what's your YouTube channel?
I think I'm Devon Larratt or Dev Larratt. Yeah, Dev Larratt. You can see me. I'm like this in my WoW T-shirt. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot. And is there any wrestling promo you want to give for your opponent that has the world title now to close this off?
Let me see. I'll hold off on that because I just don't know who my next guy is. But just know, like, I'm crazy. I'm starving for 3 days right now so that I can come back and be even more massive.